Good morning and welcome back to Reviving an Idler. So today's mission is to catch you back up with where we were. I've actually lost a significant portion of the video recordings I've taken over this restoration. That includes the erecting of this tent. It involves the ripping out of the majority of the fittings and fixtures inside the boat. It also covers a lot of the aspects to do with getting her actually in here, so I've lost a significant portion of the early stages of the restoration, which is a real shame. I still have some photos and I'll throw them in shortly. So the tarp is built very cheaply out of simple 50 by 20 mil construction pine and just a tarp over the top. Nothing fancy. Nothing overly complicated or well designed. In fact, it was actually built largely by eye. Very few measurements, as you can tell by looking at it. I had very little expectation that this would last over the winter. In fact, it's doing surprisingly well considering the winds and the rain we've had recently. So before I lost the recordings, I'd gone around the boat and I'd done a kind of survey of the whole boat, trying to identify all the things that were potentially going to be an issue in the future. We're now at the stage where I've uncovered quite a lot of the boat. I'm able to see a lot more of the boat than I was before, so I'm able to sort of identify some extra issues. I've also managed to sort of ease my mind on one or two other issues. I'm just going to quickly nip around and just point out a couple of things that are the major bugbears about the boat, and we'll see how we can address them. So the biggest and most obvious issues I have is down the stem post area. Now you've seen a couple of shots of me clearing out the bolts from in here. Now I've done a bit of carving and digging, and the rot in this mortise pocket is very bad. So this whole back end of the keel here is needing replaced. Hopefully I'll be able to cut a scarf in and just replace this back part. We'll bop inside the boat in a minute, but this post here, this has actually been added in later. And the evidence I've got for that is twofold. We've got this planking, should obviously run into a rebate here, and it's been basically capped off with this kind of little bit of edging. Basically it's been sort of glued, screwed and loosely filled into place, but there's no real rabbet, and the top of the keel doesn't line up flush with that either, so this has been popped in at a later date, possibly when they cut a notch for a prop. Now if you look at the knee, you can see that it is quite a bit wider than the new stern post. Looking at the fashion pieces, again there's a sizable gap, roughly equates to the same as that, and the same as these two steam ribs as well. There's a gap here as well. It looks newer as well, it's certainly a brighter bit of wood. So this has been replaced, and it's not been replaced to accommodate the fashion pieces or any of the ribs. So I'm a bit worried about how this is actually attached to the backbone, okay? So that needs rectified. Now the stem post is an obvious site of very clear rot. It's very badly rotten in here. It's very soft, it's crumbly. And if you follow the direction of the grain, it's running sort of that way. And it looks like it's getting taken back in towards the rabbet there. If we follow it down towards the bottom, we've got some sprung planks here. I'm not sure if that's just the fastings have been corroded. There's a little bit of softness at the very end here, but the other ones, they actually seem okay from what I can see. So we need to get in about there to find out what the deal is. And if we follow the rest of it all the way down to 4 foot, we've got some kind of rough looking wood here. It might be okay, it might not be. I expect it's probably not okay, but certainly on the outside it's salvageable at the moment. There's a wee bits and pieces that have been repaired, bits and bobs that need looking at as well. Looks like potentially a bit of rot in here. This was where the water was coming out in the first video. It was leaking through here, so there's bound to be, at the very least, some damage to the stop water and possible other leak channels as well, some other weak patches of rot in there. So we'll get in and about and have a check out of that. The last major issue I have is the ribs themselves. So I very loosely sistered this one up here to provide some support, and then the forward frame of that I've sistered as well to give it some support whilst I'm messing about with everything else. you'll see a bit more of that in the next video. Almost every single steam frame is broken, okay, and it's caused the planking to deform as well slightly. Most of the sawn frames, with the exception of that one on the port side here, are also damaged, so I'm looking at replacing nearly every single frame in the boat, so that's obviously going to take a fair bit of time as well. So the hull obviously looks a little bit like that in profile. That would be your keel on the side. So the planking is lying like that, or it should be anyway, like that. But because we've got a little bit of damage to the ribs, it has allowed this portion to fall away and fall out, and gravity has forced the whole lot down, which has caused these planks, turned this area to then deform. So what we're looking at is a plank's pushed out slightly at the bottom, so the other plank is sitting like that. So we end up with this gap here and here. Okay, so the ribs were not lying flush. So what I need to try and do is reef out the caulking, pull all that out, so it's got the space to allow the ribs to move, so that when I put the new laminate in, okay, lay the new ribbon, and then bolt back through using long screws and blocks, and that will then pull the ribs and the planks together, you know, in sort of that kind of direction, all the way down, and then hopefully then forcing everything to take the correct shape. So I need to make myself a reefing tool. Aft of this frame, the planking is lying fairly flat and neat, and it's where it should be. But moving forward at this point, the plank is all starting to get distorted as it starts to get this wider run of planking here. So my plan is basically to tie in this frame, tie in this one, and move my way forward, basically acting like a pair of laces on a pair of boots. You start lacing in one end, and then you start just lacing up, and it tightens the whole lot, pulls everything back into shape. Because if I just started trying to pull this frame in, there's too much space in these planks, there's too much movement, and I might end up deforming her involuntarily. I might pull her somewhere out, whereas this is good. So this is more likely to be where it should be when I pull it back in, which then sets up this frame to be pulled up, which then sets up this frame to be pulled in, etc, etc, down the line. Now, I said the port side is where the bulk of the damage is, so that's where the bulk of the work is going to be, but I will try and mirror. Whatever I do over here, I'll be doing on the starboard side as well, just to make sure that we've got complete strength put back in the whole way down. We have scraped back and oiled all the interior planking, so it's all looking relatively bare. Removed all of the internal cockpit. We've started to try and remove the top of the deck. It's actually quite difficult to get through the fiberglass on the decks and actually get to the deck. I'm also having some difficulty getting these coamings off here, these toe rails. They've been glued and screwed. Now this is actually quite nice teak, I believe, and I'd like to save them if possible, so I'm really trying to figure out how I'm going to get these off without cracking them. I've managed to get some of this one off by slowly easing it away, taking the screws out and easing away. However, it has started to run out onto the grain back here, so I've had to stop because there's absolutely no way I'll be able to lever against that. It will run straight through the grain and out, so I'm going to have to come up with a new plan for that. So this is where the bulk of the work was needing done. We are going to be replacing every single steam rib moving forward at this point. I can't see the point in saving any of them, and I think there's only one sawn frame on this side which is actually still sound, so I may well end up replacing that anyway because I'm going to have to place it on the other side. On the port side here, things are not so bad. This side didn't suffer any damage in that storm back in the beginning, so this side was actually largely okay. However, if I'm replacing it on the port side, I'll replace it on the starboard. So today I will be looking to try and take this coach roof off. Now the coach roof itself I don't believe is original. Some of the boat builders and designers back down in the south of England, where she was originally built, and some of the boat yards down there have taken a look at her, and they think that she's follows a very similar line to what would have been an Itchen ferry back in the day. So moving forward into the forepeak here, the biggest work has been lifting the deck. So this has been a very rough and ready job, and I do have some footage of that. We've got all this horrible fiberglass, which is quite well stuck down considering you grab the corners and you pull off a wee strip, but the majority of it is quite well stuck down. So credit to whoever put it on, they put it on well. Actually holding this down is actually the fiberglass on the top here. Just doesn't want to come off. It does run under there, so the plank is not cut here. These were cut here around, I think it was maybe a repair or something at some point, but they're not cut here. These go back under the coach roof. I don't mind breaking them off. I'm not going to use them again, except as kindling. This is one of the bottom planks. It is soaking. The weight of that. Wish you could feel it. I mean, that is heavy. That is soaking wet. As you can see, 2-layer construction, or technically 3-layer construction, because you've got this fiberglass stuff on top. So bottom planks here, as you can see, quite flexible even at that short span. Top plank on top of that, much more solid, and there's a cult seam which ran along between the top planks there, and then on top you've got the fiberglass. So whilst you get to watch me scraping some paint off the transom, I thought I would just take this chance to say that I've decided to take the entire deck off the boat, and that includes the coach roof. The reason is fairly simple. There's a lot of rot evident in the decking, and there's even rot in some of the carlins and some of the deck beams as well, so I'm going to have to get access to them anyway. The coach roof I don't believe is original, so I'll be looking to try and replace that or get rid of it anyway. And also with all the ribs needing replaced, it's actually easier to have the deck off when you've got free access to the sides of the boat, and it makes things just a bit more streamlined and simple to get it in. So I've decided to take the whole lot off just now, so you'll get a few videos of that coming up. So I started by cutting a hole down the side of the coach roof and basically trying to lever the whole thing apart. The fiberglass coating over the top of the boat made it very, very difficult to actually get in and start removing things systematically by pulling fasteners and stuff. So it was kind of very rough and ready hacking the thing to pieces. So I used jigsaws and reciprocal saws, chisels, crowbars, all kinds of stuff, you know, and just basically pulled and levered the whole coach roof apart until... So yeah, well, we're just taking the coach roof off just now. Taking out these deck beams. Just working my way along with a bit of crowbars, haul that one out. And we're working our way along this one, and then it's just split down the middle there, which has made it very handy, because now we'll just lift that whole section there out. Just goes to show you, this bit here was pretty good, to be honest. It looked pretty well encased, well enclosed, but moisture's obviously got in, but got a slug, like an actual slug. Along with all the usual woodlouse culprits. So as you can see, we've managed to get all the decking more or less off, and it's a pretty nice big open space all the way back here. Now this beam, which you can see running along here, is not actually attached to the frames, which makes me think that this has actually been added when they added the cockpit, which is probably not original, or certainly not the design that it was in. And that leads me to think that this may well have been an open workboat type of design. So I'm actually entertaining the idea of keeping that way. Another interesting thing, which I've never really noticed, to be honest, is there's no hanging knees anywhere. Now she is a little boat, but I would have thought, particularly around the mast steps and these beams on either side, there should really have been something to support the sides of the boat. I mean, there's lodging knees, albeit one pair of, there's no more than that. But I would have thought there would have been at least one hanging knee in that area as well, but there doesn't appear to be any, so I'll probably beef up the construction a little bit later on and put those in. So the issue I'm having is this top section here has been glued and screwed to this section, and this section here has been glued and screwed to the top of the planking. Now the screws that go through here don't line up with the screws that go through into the deck itself. So I can't take this off to reveal the screw heads that go into the top piece here without completely destroying this piece and this piece, and I'm hoping to save this bit of wood on each side and put them back onto the boat. And I've half got a solution now to my tow rail situation. Because we've managed to get so much of the planking, the old planking out, we've actually really weakened this last bit of planking here, this decking, sorry, we managed to get all the decking out. We've really weakened it. So what I've managed to do is all the way along here and all the way aft, I've managed to get a crowbar in and a wee spanner and just worked my way along, and I've basically lifted it going all the way to within about 2 or 3 foot of the back of the boat. I'm at about 5-6 feet of the front of the boat. I've also managed to take out some of the bolts holding in the chain plates. I managed to get them to wiggle free, so I'm just slowly working them out. But that's great news. That means I can get these tow rails off, which I am hoping to save because they are in good condition. There will be metal fastenings in there, but I'll figure out what I'm going to do later on. At the moment, at least I can get them off the boat. It means they're safe for this first stage of getting the planking sorted. That screw does go into the top whiskey plank there. But if you look closely, there's actually a split running on both sides, more or less the whole way along, and there are certain areas of damage to the whiskey plank as well on both sides. We've flipped over to the port side. You can see it's even been rather crudely repaired here with a piece of sistering block which has come in. You can see all these lines here. All the way along. Okay, so it's looking like we'll have to either replace the whole thing or at least replace a large part of it. So I'm not too worried about ripping out the screws at the moment on this one. that was hardly a fair fight. Got it though. And it gives you just a good chance to see her. All opened up. When you see a boat like this, your heart sinks. I mean, you just think, my God, what a lot of work. You know? So at the moment, restoration wise, I still think it's looking quite promising. We have a lot of work still to do. The only thing that I really is going to be a deal breaker at the moment is if the planking behind the stem, if the end of the planking along the stem there is completely rotten and ruined, it's going to necessitate replacing a lot of the planking. And that may well put her into the bracket of not worth our time and energy restoring, but we'll see in the next, hopefully the next episode, when we'll actually really scrape back and have a really good nosy in behind that stem piece and just see what's going in there. But as for the planking, I can see here, all looks fine, all looks pretty good. The keel largely looks pretty good, as we've already seen, apart from that piece right at the back behind the stern post. So that's still a major issue. With that, combined with potentially replacing planks, we're getting into a kind of tally-ho type restoration where we're really replacing more than 70% of the boat, which is, for me, I think I'd probably prefer to build a new boat then at that point. But see how things go, eh? So the plan of attack looks a little bit like this. We've cleared the deck, we've cleared the tow rail, so we've got complete access to the tops of all the frames. The big issue, as you saw, is going to be the keel. I need to make sure the keel is going to be salvageable. However, I can't get to the keel until I've got some strength back in the sides of the boat, so I need to tackle the frames. So the plan is to put some steam bent frames in here, buckle the boat up so it's all drawn back in, there's a bit of strength back into the planks, so that when I jack her up and I put the post supports under her hull, under her bunks, and then lower the boat back down onto it, it shouldn't deform, it shouldn't break the planking, it shouldn't damage her. At the moment, if I tried to do that, I'd effectively be putting a post onto one individual plank. There's nothing tying what plank to the rest of them really at the moment. So I need to put some strength back into especially the midships area of the boat, so that when I do layer back down on our bunks, so I can drop the keel out of her, we've got some strength there to allow me to do that. So that's the first priority. Then, once I've got the ribs back in, at the very least the steamed ribs, I'll be in a position where I can jack her up, drop the keel out, drop the ballast keel off mainly, get that out of the way, drop the main keel out of her and have a real look and see just how bad it is, if there's any chance it can be saved, if I have to scarf it, or if that is the line in the sand where I have to say, well, fair enough, we have to end the restoration here, it's just going to be far too expensive to take this boat any further. Well, that's about all we've got time for this week. Stay tuned, because next time I'll be looking at installing the first of the ribs, and I'll also be digging about at the back of the keel and exposing as much of that as we possibly can. Stay tuned, like, subscribe, and please continue to support us. Cheers!